Most businesses today don't actually have an automation problem. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cutting through the hype and looking at the single most crucial step you absolutely have to take before you even think about dropping AI into your operations. So let's kick things off with a bit of a contrarian truth, one that might challenge why some of those recent AI projects didn't quite deliver the ROI you were hoping for. Like I just said, most businesses do not have an automation problem. What they actually have is a workflow clarity problem. We love to blame the AI agent or the software when things go sideways, but honestly, the root cause is almost always just a total lack of understanding about what's literally happening on the ground. Because here's the thing. When teams try to apply AI to a process they haven't genuinely unpacked, they just end up scaling their own internal confusion. I mean, think about it. If your current workflow is a tangled web of messy emails, hidden spreadsheets, and a bunch of unwritten rules living entirely in someone's head, slapping an AI agent on top of that isn't going to fix the mess. It's just going to make that mess happen way, way faster. You literally cannot automate chaos. You have to map it first. And that brings us to our core concept for today, workflow decomposition. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but it's really just a very practical exercise. It means achieving complete 100% process clarity before you even glance at system design. It's about taking this massive, messy business process and breaking it down into tiny, completely observable units of work. Because until you know exactly what the inputs, outputs, and handoffs are, you just aren't ready for AI. There is a really stark difference between the vague way most folks talk about automation and the hyper-precise steps you actually need to make it work. Trying to automate an idea is a massive trap. Saying, hey, we're going to automate support. That's a goal, right? It's not a map. But automating a process, that is actionable. You can't write code for a vague concept like support, but you can absolutely write code for ticket intake or classification. Decomposing your business process. How to map the reality. Okay, so here's exactly how you map a process chronologically. First up, you find the trigger. What actually kicks this whole thing off? Then the actors. Who touches it and exactly when? You absolutely have to map out the decisions, those moments where the work branches off into different directions. And this is crucial, the exceptions. What happens when things inevitably break? Finally, you define the output. What does done objectively look like? Doing this forces every single hidden handoff out into the open. But there is one golden rule here, and you cannot skip this. You have to document the real process, not the ideal one. You've got to go validate this map with the actual people doing the work. Because if you just map out what the official employee handbook says, your automation is going to fail, guaranteed. You have to capture those hidden shortcuts, the secret workaround spreadsheets, and all the real-world delays that happen on the floor every single day. While you're in there mapping that reality, you're actually hunting for very specific traits. These are your highest value automation candidates. Ask yourself, are your people spending hours just copy-pasting data between tabs? Are they totally bogged down by high-volume, rule-based status updates? Those are the exact bottlenecks that are practically screaming for automation. Code, AI, and humans, the triad rule of automation. Now, once everything is mapped, you follow the triad rule. This is what prevents your new system from being brittle. You have to keep these three lanes strictly separated. First, traditional code. Code is absolutely perfect for strict rules and validation, like routing a form. Second, AI agents. These should only be deployed when you're dealing with messy language, unstructured data, or drafting text. And third, humans. We keep humans in the loop for complex judgment calls, building client relationships, and handling those weird edge case exceptions we talked about earlier. Case study. Support tickets. Let's see decomposition in action. Let's ground this with a real example. If you map a standard support ticket's lifecycle chronologically, you get a remarkably clear picture. The ticket comes in at minute 0. 5 minutes in, it gets classified. A response is drafted at 15 minutes. Maybe at an hour, it escalates. And hopefully, by 24 hours, it's resolved. By breaking it down into these observable steps on a timeline, you can instantly see which parts are just repetitive, which are ambiguous, and which actually require human sign-off. And when you overlay our triad rule onto that exact timeline, it becomes incredibly obvious where an AI agent belongs. And honestly, more importantly, where it absolutely doesn't. Intake and routing, that is deterministic. Use traditional code for that. Reading a chaotic, messy email from a frustrated client to draft up a summary, that is the perfect job for an AI language model. But that final escalation to solve a really unique, complex billing issue, you keep that firmly assigned to a human. That right there is how you build a resilient system. Automate only what's stable.
the implementation loop. So, the cardinal rule of actually implementing this mapped process is incredibly simple. Start with exactly one workflow. Literally, just one. You have to isolate a single, high-value process first so you can test it thoroughly. Whatever you do, do not try to transform your entire organization all at once.
Following a strict implementation loop ensures you don't just take a broken manual process and turn it into a broken automated process at a massive scale. You define what success looks like first. Then run a pilot. And critically, you have to add logs and fallbacks. Because look, the AI will occasionally fail. So what happens when it does? You have to fix those bottlenecks during the pilot phase before you ever think about expanding.
So, what actually happens if you skip workflow decomposition?
Let's talk about the pain waiting for leaders who ignore this. It is so tempting to just skip the mapping, skip the pilots, and jump straight into buying those flashy new AI tools. But if you do that, you are basically inviting disaster. You'll inevitably automate the completely wrong things, you'll create totally broken handoffs because nobody mapped who touches the work next, and worst of all, you'll assign AI to handle judgment calls it is absolutely not suited for, which creates massive operational risk and a brittle system that breaks the second your volume scales up.
Which brings us to the most critical takeaway from today's explainer. If you cannot break a workflow into small, observable steps, you are simply not ready to automate it. It's really that simple. Process clarity has to dictate your system design. You must map the reality first.
You have to actually understand the reality of your operations before you can ever hope to enhance them. AI is an incredible accelerator, for sure, but if you accelerate a broken, misunderstood process, you're really just getting to the wrong destination a whole lot faster. Always remember, automation should follow understanding, never replace it.
So, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think about the very next AI project sitting on your desk right now. Ask yourself honestly, do you know exactly what happens between the request coming in and the result going out? Every single step, every handoff, every weird exception. Because until you can answer that with absolute mapped certainty, put the AI on hold and start decomposing. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll see you next time.